video, I want to explore the formation of concentrated power, its ascendancy in the form of mission and purpose, and the bifurcation point where that power either deteriorates into corruption and ultimate dissolution, or continues to grow by providing increased value. So all power, all organization, all purpose starts with human need. There's a group of people, an individual or a group of individuals, who have a need. Abraham Maslow identifies a hierarchy of 7 core human needs: survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem, developing one's potential, one's gifts and talents, bringing those out into the world in a competent and meaningful way, experiencing the abundance that comes with increased competence and sharing of strengths, and then to transcend the self, to transcend the small identity of the just me by being involved with a project, a mission, a purpose of something bigger than oneself, of something more. And so we all have a series of needs. And every structure, every organization, every concentration of power begins with an attempt to respond to those needs. So we have a mission. The mission can be to provide food for every human being, to provide food for one's family, to protect the public in the event of nuclear war, whatever. There is a mission that in some way relates to the need. And having formulated a mission, which always correlates to human need, we then have a strategy. We are going to be the best company for providing garage doors in a cheap and affordable way for the need of people's security, blah, blah, blah. We are going to be competent at fulfilling these needs in these particular ways. And in order to fulfill the strategy, the description of the strategy is broken down into roles. So we have, our goal is, our mission is to create more healing and integration. Our goal is to have healthier relationships. So we need roles. We need people who teach healthy relationship skills. We have a need for someone to man the office and take phone calls. We have someone who needs to do our computer work. We have someone that needs to drive materials from point A to point B. So roles are developed to fulfill the strategy. And each role has a set of skills. And with that set of skills comes the concept of best practices. Now, a best practice is something that accomplishes the goal that the role was designed to play more effectively than another practice. For example, if the goal is transportation and the role is bus driver, stopping at stoplights is an increased, it's a best practice relative to not stopping at stoplights. And so you have a set of protocols that are designed around the best practices that create the least amount of unnecessary pain and the most amount of desired value. And so here you have a job, different roles and best practices And then finally, you need to find people who are willing and able to play the role. And of course, a best practice for the person finding those playing the roles is to understand what the best practices are for a given role, to clearly communicate those, and to assess an individual's ability to be someone in that role who is competent, who is embodying best practices versus abusing the role. Now you have an organization. Could be a nonprofit, could be a government, could be a for-profit, could be an army. You have an organization with a mission, with a set of roles, with a set of best practices that all tie back to the mission, which ties back to human need. And then you have the sale, because the entire organization is formed to serve the needs of the group of people whose needs it was organized to form. You don't form an organization unless there are people's needs that you are trying to meet. However, just because you've decided to start a bus company to move people from point A to point B doesn't mean that people want to get on your bus. They may need transportation, but they may not be confident that your bus will make it all the way to the end. They may not be competent that the drivers will be warm and friendly while driving the bus. So there is a selling process. And the sale is an explicit or an implicit contract between the organization, and this can be as small as one person playing multiple roles and things, and the people being served. And the contract always goes something like this. You give me access to your time, make your body vulnerable on this bus, show up at my therapy office. You make your resources in certain forms available to me. Give me some of your money. Give me some of your time. Give me the benefit of the doubt. Give me trust. Give me a certain amount of risk, because there's a risk in any relationship. Take that risk. And in exchange, this is my mission, and I promise you that as a result of what you've given me, a form of power, a form of influence, you will experience more well-being in these ways. And this is always an explicit or implicit contract, because no one signs up for a contract that reads like this. We want you to give us 10 hours of your time, $10,000, take a huge risk, and at the end of this, you will feel terrible and have absolutely no benefit from the experience, nor will any of your friends have any benefit. In fact, everyone will feel terrible, and the world will be a worse place because you trusted us. These organizations fall apart very quickly. It's much more quickly if this contract is spelled out. And so nobody sells or attempts to make a sale on those terms, because nobody buys. And so the entire organization falls apart. But the contract that makes the sale based on the premise that not only will you receive value, and those things that you care about and people you love will receive value up to the point of the value you gave. Because, if I give you $10 and you give me $10 worth of value, it's about equal. I mean, why bother? If it's a complete break even, there's no point. So the value has to be in excess, because the $10 has value. You could spend it in money other places. So you have to not only, to make a sale, you not only have to earn the $10, you have to earn it more than all the other options available, which means the promise has to be more compelling. Because if this person is promising me that my life's going to improve 100% if I spend $10 with them, and this person is saying 10% of my clients receive medium benefit within 6 months, well, if both are telling the truth and have credibility, I'm going to pick the 100% improvement over the next few days rather than medium improvement over the next 6 months, because it's more valuable. Now, the key around this entire process is trust. If the offering, if the contract is compelling, and there is trust, the sale is made and the organization is perpetuated. And there's a very interesting thing that happens around this time, meaning every organization starts out with a promise and a mission to help people. But having been formed, for example, the United States government didn't used to exist. It didn't used to collect income tax. It didn't used to force the draft. It didn't used to have any number of provisions and powers. It didn't used to arrest people for eating mushrooms. There are any number of things that it did not have in its domain. And in each case where laws are written or powers are granted or roles are created, the roles are sold in a democracy. The laws are sold in terms of how this will help the majority of the citizenry. So if you want to make psychedelic mushrooms into a Schedule I drug, you have to tell a story of hideous, outrageous, and horrible events that will occur that threaten the entire population if people are allowed to continue eating mushrooms the way they have in hundreds of cultures for thousands of years. You have to say that, terrible things are going to occur there that are so terrible that people have to be arrested, that billions of dollars have to be spent locking them up to offset this horror that will occur. And and here we come into the first area of corruption. When the purpose of a law, of a power structure, of a role, is to protect the majority of human beings, is to enhance the well-being, to meet the needs of a majority of human beings, then the cost of the service, the cost of the law, whatever it is, has to be dramatically less than the benefit. Because, for example, saying that we need $1 trillion in order to fight crime that amounts to $1 billion is a no-go. Who wants to spend $1 trillion to recoup $1 billion? No one. No one thinks that's a good idea. And so there has to be a cost-benefit analysis. Now, the corruption of an organization or a power comes from the fact that while no organization can be formed intelligently without helping a certain group of people, because no one's going to support an organization that doesn't help them or people they care about. The first form of corruption comes in the form of suppressing data about how important the need is. For example, if your plane ticket costs $100 and you're encouraged to buy travel protection insurance that costs $35, this is only intelligent if you have a greater than 35% odds of canceling your flight. If you have a 50-50 odds of canceling your flight and your travel insurance is $35, this could be a good and reasonable purchase. But if out of the last 100 flights that you've taken, you've only canceled one, then to spend more than $1 on trip insurance is, on a statistical basis, not necessarily terribly intelligent. And so there can be a distortion of data to inflate artificially the need for something that is actually harmful to the individual, just by emphasizing all the threats and talking that up, and then pricing the service quite highly in such a way that the entire country would be more prosperous if the service didn't exist at all at that price point. And so you can have a corruption in this dynamic here. The other thing is, of course, that in a framework where the attachment is more to money than to human beings, in a capitalist framework, capital is measured, but human beings are not. And what is measured tends to be elevated. And one can tell what is measured is, you can look in a capitalist framework and say, okay, is there a list of the kindest people in the country? No. Is there a list of the best parents in the country? No. Is there a list of the best teachers in the country? No. Are there a list of the most ethical priests and priestesses in the country? No. There are a list of the biggest companies and the richest companies and the biggest and wealthiest individuals. There's lots of lists of those. Because in a capitalist framework, capital is framed as more valuable than human beings, so it's got to be measured. And this is, of course, a little bit dicey on a mathematical level, because how do you go about proving mathematically that the people who create the idea of capital, the people who vote for a capitalist paradigm, and the people who make all of the money, and the people who invest all of the money are less important than the money created in that outcome? It's a very difficult mathematical equation to make, but it's one of the areas where the cult in capitalism takes over from the science and allows us to effectively dwell on capital and ignore the human beings involved. Now, when this tension erupts, where capital is viewed as more important than human beings, then the formation of an organization is not to help other human beings. It is to acquire capital in the most expedient and legal way possible, or maybe the most expedient way possible, legal or illegal, providing we don't get caught. And here, nobody is going to hire your service if you say, my number one goal is to make as much money as possible with as little effort as possible in whatever way I can get away with. And I will do just barely what I need to do not to be caught and not to be, harassed and all that. That's my number one goal. Then the sale doesn't get made. And so there's a split within the personas of many of the people playing the roles in organization. On the web page, on the mailer, on the brochure, in the sales talk, it's all about, we're committed to you no matter what, we're going to be there, spare no expense, we're totally committed to your success and your well-being, anything we can do to help. And then as soon as the money is extracted, off they go, and it becomes very clear from behavior that those were just words. And of course, with that, the trust evaporates. And before the information age, there would be a sustainability as long as new customers could be found. As accountability and various review sites are written, this practice becomes less sustainable, and so people actually have to deliver on the promise if they want to continue to secure an income from their stated mission. Now, when a relationship begins between an organization and the person whose need that organization is or designed and organized to meet, there is a relationship. And that relationship generates data relative to the mission. So, for example, Timothy Leary did a study while at Harvard to determine how effective therapy was. And so he took 100 people who were taking, who were participating in psychotherapy, and 100 people, the control group, that was not participating in psychotherapy. And he took notes on all of their, various states and needs and all that at the and then 1 year later, he came back. And what he found was that a third of the people had gotten better, a third of the people had gotten worse, and a third of the people were about in the same place as they were the year before. But the surprising thing was that this was not just for the therapeutic group. This was both groups. And so on that surface level, and we say surface level because what's missed, is how much better and how much worse, etc. That what is not clear in the narrative. But on that surface level, there was absolutely no difference between the people who had taken psychotherapy and those who had not. A third had gotten better, a third had gotten worse, a third about the same in both groups. So when you develop a relationship relative to your mission, you start generating data. You start generating statistics. I feel 10% better for 3 hours after visiting your restaurant, for example. Okay, so you get a nourishing food, don't die and are not poisoned, and you feel 10% better for the 3 hours, and then you forget about the thing, and it has to be repeated, or there's no further benefit to your life. Okay, that's data, that's statistics. Now, every single system, remember the system is need, followed by mission to meet the need, followed by strategy, followed by roles, followed by protocols and best practices, certainly protocols, hopefully best practices, followed by a sale. Please give us your power, your money, whatever, and we will provide this benefit. And then you have the relationship. Now you get statistics. Every single system to meet every single mission is flawed, meaning that no organization provides perfect value in response to their strategy, etc., 100% of their time. So there will be a statistic between people that were helped, people were helped a lot, people were helped a little. In this area, they were helped a lot. In this area, they were not helped at all. In this area, it made it worse. And this will be a data set. And some of that data, going back to the therapeutic study, for example, a third of the clients got better. Now, a third of the clients the people got better in and out of therapy. But of course, a psychotherapist might point to that and say, I did that. But you'd have to have a certain amount of context of the alternatives and why, for example, did a third of the people get better who weren't taking psychotherapy. So you'd have to have an understanding, a narrative, a theory of why this behavior correlated with this state. And all systems are going to produce a certain amount of failure. For example, you might have a new drug that 99% of the time people take the drug and feel better, but 1% of the time they start having epileptic fits, and if not given rapid treatment, etc., they die. So you've got a 99% chance of the thing working and a 1% chance of death. Now, to know if that's a good idea, you have to know what the mission is. If the mission is to stop families from being raped, okay, what we do is we send armed guards in and patrol, and if you're raped, we run in with machine guns and try and shoot the killers. And 99% of the time, we succeed, and 1% of the time we shoot you by accident. People might go along with that because the thought of having their daughters and their wives raped, etc., is like, I'll take a 1% chance of being shot by accident. Here's your money. But there is a statistical failure rate, and this is the diversion between an organizational structure that continues to grow and become mission bound. And I'm focusing more on mission bound, where you have sincere mission, as opposed to what do I have to say to get money because I want money and I don't really care, how I get it. And it's a divergence point at this point because now we've got some positive data. Even with placebos, you get positive data, meaning you can give someone sugar pills and some of them will get healthy. You can do fake surgeries, and a number of people will get healthy. The placebo effect is accounted for up to 40% of a number of physiological symptoms. And you need a double-blind experiment or protocol so that no one knows which is and isn't the placebo. And an active placebo works a little better, where you can tell it's doing something and you don't know what it's supposed to do. An active placebo maybe gives you a little tingle or something, but isn't the real drug. But you will get some benefit in some cases, and you will get some harm in some cases. And of course, a great organization with a great mission and a great strategy and a great set of best practices and competent people to play it will get overwhelmingly positive results relative to their mission, but still some poor results. And an incompetent group will get, with a misunderstood mission, insane strategy, no understanding of best practices, poor hiring choices, will get a large percentage of disaster. Now, what's interesting is the evolution of every organization. If you walk into your United States government, I've done this a lot with different officials. It's pretty common to get the feeling that the long-suffering officials on the other side of the desk serving the public would rather be anywhere than here, could give a shit about what works for you and what doesn't, and is just doing whatever the protocol is, and is quite indignant at the idea that you as the public paying for the whole thing would actually receive any benefit. And they would be just as indignant about being fired. What do you mean, we're fired? I'm doing, I followed Form A46B and irritated this client. Then I, applied Protocol B26A and pissed off this member of the public with another inane law. Why on earth am I being fired? And so there's a kind of an evolutionary process where all organizations are formed to serve and gather initially a group of people that presumably want to serve, particularly in the nonprofit sector where there's not an anticipation of making much money. I mean, if you're volunteering or doing stuff, I mean, you don't say, gee, let me gather together to make the world a worse place. I'd like to volunteer my time to do that. No, it's usually some positive thing. However, within the human need framework is survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem, etc. And we identify ourselves with the organizations that we belong to. We identify with the personas that spend a lot of our time doing something. So if we volunteer at Doctors Without Borders, by definition, we think it's a good idea, because otherwise, why would we volunteer? Doctors Without Borders sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Doctors who care about human beings more than they care about the border. They care about black people as well as white people. They just want to help people. Wonderful. Doctors Without Borders. But then you get into the organizational structure, and suddenly you discover there's all kinds of borders. We're helping this group because there's less fighters in that area of town, more than we're helping this group. This local crime militia lets us come in and fix their people, and they go up and shoot people. And meanwhile, the government doesn't let us protect the public because they're too pride. So we ignore the public, and we're busy repairing bandages on the most violent criminals because their gang leadership is more intelligent than the local government. Not an uncommon phenomena. So suddenly, Doctors Without Borders, I'm just patching up criminals to go out and kill more people. Well, do you tell the press? Do you bring this to the attention? Like, will people donate money to Doctors Without Borders, this lofty ideal, if the real narrative is help crime lords keep their key gang members alive? Please donate here. For every $10 you donate, we will rehabilitate one violent gang member in Sudan. No, that doesn't sound very good. We've got to suppress that, that narrative. But because we belong to Doctors Without Borders, we believe in the right of this and that and the other, and so there's an identity that comes with the things that we participate in, and the more that we do them, the more that we identify with them. And whatever we identify with, money, roles, power, race, whatever we identify with is what falls under this umbrella of human needs. Survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem, whatever we identify with. An organization, a gang, a family. We want to survive. And the trouble is that many organizational patterns need to die. They need to end because they have become dissociated with their mission. Doctors Without Borders was not formed to rehabilitate violent crime members in politically obtuse countries. That wasn't its goal. Its goal was to help the innocent without regard for income and skin and all that. And its strategy of helping anyone indiscriminately can be corrupted if it isn't a sophisticated strategy. And so here you have the data coming in that we're doing the exact opposite, that more people are being shot by rehabilitating gang members than if we didn't exist. That wasn't our goal. And so the tension between the strategy and the mission requires a constant stream of data. And some of that data is not politically correct. What's politically correct? Well, politically correct is not the data that someone giving up a Starbucks coffee to donate $10 to Doctors Without Borders wants to hear. I'm not giving up my effing coffee to rehabilitate a gang member who's going to go out and shoot 3 people because his life was saved with my coffee money. That's not my plan. But it does happen. And in a competent organization, then there's also administration costs, which dilutes the mission. Some nonprofits have 30% of their donated money go to pay for the advertising cost to get the other 75% or 70%. So it's like, wow, it's like for every dollar I give, 30% is going to be spent on mailings to get me to feel guilty for not giving more. And only 70% is going to actually make it to there. And then of that, it's going to be incompetently spent. So data is the ally of the public and the people being served. But it's not always. The more incompetent the organization, the less willing they are to have transparency in data. Because what every organization does is it was formed to help the public. But as people's identities get enmeshed in the organization, their need for the organization to survive and feel secure and have a sense of good reputation and love and belonging becomes higher than the need for the people to have the needs met that the whole organization was formed to serve. And this is, of course, the point of corruption. The moment that the loyalty becomes to the perpetuation of an organization at whatever cost, or a role at whatever cost. When you were hired for a role, presumably you had some interest in helping people in that role. Like you're being hired for a lifeguard. Presumably it was because you wanted to help drowning people. You at least got a power hit off of it. Maybe you actually cared about the people and it had a drowning experience. You want to help people. But let's say you let someone drown under dubious circumstances. Oh, there were 3 girls you were flirting with, and there was alcohol on the job, and the person screamed multiple times, and everyone saw them but you, and they drowned. Oh my gosh, but this gig, flirting with girlfriends, looking cool, drinking on the job, this is a cool gig. We can't lose the role. We can't, lose the job over something as trivial as letting the odd person die while flirting. So now the truth has to be distorted. No, let's get rid of all the alcohol bottles. Pretend you don't know me. All the girlfriends have to disappear. Look very studious. Invent some fake weather if possible. There was a huge wave, then this happened, then someone urgently needed. So create a narrative that pretends that I'm more competent than them, because the role, see, I like this identity. I'm the lifeguard. And of course, I'm supposed to be saving lives, but what's really important is I'm the lifeguard. I'm the one that I can blow my whistle, and everyone has to look and get out of the water is wonderful, and I can look cool and paddle out to cute girls and say, how you doing? Just checking up on you. I'm cool, by the way. Go back to your stand. So this is so we have the corruption of the narcissistic self-centeredness of I want to meet my needs by corrupting the role versus I want to justify meeting my needs by fulfilling the role. Because a lot of these, most roles in a capitalist framework is if you don't do your role, you don't survive. You need a role. And so it creates this tension. I've got to fake my grades so that I get the job. But now that I've got the job, I'm endangering people's lives because I faked my grades and I'm not actually competent in the area that I got. But if my boss is corrupt too, maybe he doesn't care that I faked my grades because I asked for a lower salary. And that's all that he's interested in is saving money because then there's more money for his salary. And so the corruption is the divergence between the stated purpose and role and the most competent practices of meeting the needs that any organization or individual is formed to meet, and the actual pattern and thought, which can be 180 degrees apart. So you have corruption in roles, and you have corruption in strategy, and you have corruption of data about what the best practices are. Gee, I read that eating chocolate is good for your health. Now, I'm a doctor, and I want to feel good about myself, so why don't I just start recommending that more of my clients eat chocolate, and I'll keep eating chocolate and gaining weight as well. And people will love me for it. That's what they've all been wanting to hear. They don't want to hear about reducing sugar, reducing starch, refined sugars and carbohydrates and dairy. They don't want to hear that. That's what feels good. Fat feels good. So I'll have more clients and feel justified getting fat if I just find some arcane study somewhere and put it out for my clients. They'll love me. They'll quit going to real doctors that tell them to go to the gym. They'll all come to me. And I can proudly hold up the study that showed, in the cacao bean there were antioxidants, and we all know because we read it in Time Mag. We all know that's what we have to focus on, and so let's ignore all the sugar data, which most chocolate is largely sugar and all that, and we'll focus and we'll pretend that a Snickers bar should replicate the effects of studying bitter, hard, horribly tasting cacao beans. And my clients will love it because they all want to do the various addictive things they want to do while feeling noble about it. And I'll try and figure out how to be impressive. I'll have a really fancy office, which I can afford because I'll have all these rich clients that want to be pampered into their addictions, and this, that, and the other. And of course, this is frowned on by sincere people in the field, but it's who cares? If the goal was to make lots of money, you figured it out. And and as laws change and this and that, we'll kind of squeeze around here. Well, yes, there was that study, but it could have been false. Keep eating sugar and chocolate. And so there's these various points of corruption, and sometimes the service is lying. Sometimes the primary service is to lie and corrupt the truth and the protocol to make people feel good about their compulsions and addictions or being fat or whatever it is. And, oh, you look wonderful now that you've gained 20 pounds over your already obese state. Oh, I hardly notice it. And okay, we'll buy some items from him because I want to go out and be lied to. And if I spend enough money, there will be a good lineup of people willing to lie to me. So you have that kind of corruption. But the corruption that, that is, very demarked is, what do you do with the negative data? What do sincere people who form the best practice and are doing whatever they're doing, what do you do at this point where, you've given this drug as a doctor, you've given this practice as a meditation teacher, you've prescribed vitamin C, whatever it is, X number of times and had these great results or somewhat decent results or whatever it is. And then someone presents information that is likely to correlate to what you've prescribed or recommended, and it's bad. I got worse because I hired you. I lost all my money because I took your investment advice. I feel like shit because I just did therapy with you. I got raped because I trusted the person you said was a good guy. It doesn't happen as much with women, date rape and stuff, raping men. But, either way, had my money stolen, whatever. It didn't work. What do you do at that point when the organization's protocol results in disaster? And this is this point where the underlying loyalty to the survival, the security, and the sense of reputation of the organization I identify with, and the loyalty to the mission that the organization is designed to serve comes into play. Where's the underlying loyalty? Because if the loyalty is to self, I am the mission. My mission is to make money by looking good, by suppressing negative information, blah, blah, blah. I am the mission, and you're it's irritating you didn't get better because now you make me look bad, and blah, blah, blah. So is either the loyalty to the identity of the organization or to the self-centeredness of the covert mission that was there all along. Because negative data is treated very differently depending on where the loyalty lies. So in a competent, ethical, integrated situation where the person is retaining primary loyalty to the individuals that the organization was designed to serve, you get a pattern that leads to increased competency. So the first thing that happens is data is sincerely and fully gathered. What are all of the various things around the person tries to learn why, in your case, things went south. And so in a medical thing like, well, what foods were you eating? Did you have any allergies? And so lots and lots of data is gathered around this. And so then the data is processed. What can we find anything out there that would help us understand why this didn't work? This person paid money, showed up, did what we said, and their life did not improve. It went down. Why? What happened? So you process, you gather as much data as possible that's relevant. You process the data. And in the process, a theory will emerge. I wonder, what's different about you? Is there a genetic difference? Is there this? Is there this? I see. We didn't take this into account. Our theory is that for people like you, We should have done it like this, but we did it like this. And then the theory gets tested with more data. There's usually enough people and enough stuff going on that you can find some evidence to support or weaken the proposed theory. And the theories rest, meaning no theory is complete. All theories evolve with time, becoming more nuanced, becoming more complex, and thus more accurate. And so the theory rests at a point where it seems to be able to explain all of the existing data. And then the theory will be challenged and refined at such point when it no longer does so. When there's too much anomalous noise on the fringes of the theory for the theory to explain. And so the theory has to be refined and developed to add an account for all of the known data. So you refine the model, and every theory is refined. Every model becomes more sensitive and more complex if it wants to develop. And if you want to increase your effectiveness of transforming energy into successfully embodying your mission, you have to embrace complexity, nuance, and sensitivity, because we're moving in the direction of individuality, which is a reality. Now, new feedback is generated as the new model is applied. Okay, applying this model and using this as our back, let's do this. Let's try this. Now, how are you doing? Now, how are you doing? Now, how are you doing? So there's a feedback loop that goes on until you have a model of reality that lines up with the data. And this becomes the new refined model. A new question gets added to the questionnaire. A new blood test is added, knowing that every 1,000th person is going to get have the same issue, and we want to catch it before their lives are ruined. So you have a new refinement, and you also have accountability for impact. This is the really big difference between the egotism of self-centeredness and the transcendence of putting service of the mission first. You have humility. How can I improve? What did I do wrong? How is this for you? So you have humility. You have an apology. I'm not perfect, and I'm sorry. And I'm particularly sorry if this was a very obvious and repeatable mistake, like driving under the influence of alcohol as a bus driver or whatever. I mean, there's no great research that needs to be done there. There's just a betrayal of the role to hand back the betrayal of the cult. You know, that cult traumatized that bus driver to a point that they became an alcoholic. Pain and depression welled up to a point they didn't want to deal with it, so they drank, hoped they could get away with it, and gave the sociopathic behavior back to the cult, because the cult didn't come round and say, hey, are you depressed today? Do you need some help? Can you afford therapy? Or are you stuck drinking alcohol indefinitely to manage a high level of pain we dumped on you in childhood and haven't bothered to clear up? You know, violation tends to go back and forth. You violate a member of the public's ability to meet their needs. They end up being less competent to serve the public needs, and so everyone loses. You have apology. You have transparency. A competent doctor publishes results. A competent drug company developing a new medicine says 30% of people develop diarrhea, 70% developed migraines, but all of them, or 98% of them, do benefit in reducing a brain blood clot. So, if you're willing to tolerate misery and excruciating agony for 3 or 4 days, plus pay our fee, you can reduce a blood clot that we think is worth the sacrifice. And so, but you have transparency about the side effects, about who benefits, and and you have change where appropriate. You have asking for help where is appropriate. I don't know how to make this better. Anyone else out there know? Because that's part of the mission. Asking for help outside when there's not competency inside is consistent with the mission. And you also have repair of damage, particularly in a professional relationship where, I gave you my laptop to clear up the computer virus. I did not give you my laptop so that your dog could pee on it and ruin my screen for a fee. Give me back my money, give me a new screen, and we're good. So repairing the damage to restore the integrity with the contract. Remember, the contract in any organization is always the same. You give me your trust. You give me your money. You give me your time. You give me this risk factor. And I will make your life better in this and this and this area. That's my promise, or I have no legitimate basis for existing. We don't need more people saying, give us all this time, money, and energy so that we can ruin your life. We need people capable of fulfilling the promise. Now, when this protocol is followed, where the mission is served and held loyal, the mission grows, and the trust with it, the trustworthiness of those in the role of stewarding the mission, and with it the value of the organization. The value goes up because the legitimate reputation of the organization goes up. Now, a very different thing happens when you have egotistical incompetence, we might call it. The first thing that happens when, you're part of the group that is harmed, and remember, there's always, in any system, there is noise, even very good systems like freeway systems. There are people who die on freeways who didn't deserve to. I mean, someone's bumper flew off 5 cars ahead, hit you at 70 miles an hour, shattering your windshield. You couldn't see, and you were rammed by a truck. That's not your fault. That's the current system of highways, which has a certain fatality rate. And it may be the liability of the mechanic that didn't use the right screws for the bumper. Or it might have been a freak in the plastic mold. It can be traced back, but that wasn't your fault. Nor should highways be stopped because you got hit with a flying bumper, or one person got hit with a flying bumper. But the system should always be analyzed, because that's what grows the system, the imperfect system that gets a little bit more perfect with more data and refinement. But instead, what happens with kind of the destroying kind of where the mode where it switches, which has happened in most governments, where you just have to spend time with your local government to end up feeling often completely unhelped and pay a lot of money to be irritated. Where it flips is when the individuals involved feel a sense of self-pity, entitlement, martyrhood, where the people they were formed to serve become nuisances. Oh my gosh, these fucking members of the public, they're so dumb. Didn't they read the code in page 784 of the local building code about how to handle plumbing issues after a tornado? They didn't read that? Oh my goodness. And so that you have this sense of long suffering. I have to deal with the public. It's like, my life would be so much better as a government official if the public would all just, disappear. Forgetting, of course, that you don't have to have this job. We'd probably all be happier if you didn't. And you begged for this authority under pledges that we were going to never abuse this power and do it for your good, and you'll get such a good return on your investment that makes it worth forfeiture and seizure if you don't pay your taxes and all this. And so there was this promise that's now the attitude has shifted, where you're here to make my life easy and I don't owe you anything. And so in that situation, you get blame, you get irritation. It's a self-centeredness, self-pity, self-importance, martyr. How can I fuck you around with my power? This takes a variety of different things. You have shaming the client. In therapy, you can say, well, I guess you weren't being real enough. Let's not look at the fact that I don't understand traumatic theory, because that came around after I went to school, and I don't really want to go back and study that at my age. So, you didn't do your deep work or something like that. So you have shame and blame the client for ineffectiveness. You have avoid data. We're not going to ask you how we did, anything like that. We don't want to know. So you have avoid the data. But that allows us to pretend that everything's wonderful, because we didn't ask any questions. We didn't say, how did we do? How happy are you on a 1 to 10 scale or anything like that? Because we don't want to know. We don't want to hear it. We're in this fucked up job we have to do just to get by. And I don't want to hear how we could do better, And so we have getting busy. Like, I'd love to be able to talk to you, but I'm busy selling new customers on the service that didn't work for you. They don't know that it doesn't work yet, and so I've got to prioritize sales. And then we have the self-centeredness of the professional that's somehow magically believes that the customer is there to solve their need. And so they say, well, could you show up at this time in this way at this point that's convenient for me? Because, I have, this and that and going on in my life and this and that. And I'd be great if, don't send me emails about this and that. Do this for me and do that for me, because it's all about my needs. And you're the customer and your job is to meet my needs. There can also be, if the client complains or criticizes, withdrawal of affection and support. Whoa, I wasn't expecting any honest feedback. I don't think we want to do, let's just part ways, because I didn't sign up to hear what's crappy about my service. So, meet my needs, make this easy for me, or off you go. There can also be, if there's a reputational issue, an effort to tarnish. I had a client who was an incest survivor, one of the many delightful things our culture produces, and the attorneys in a bus had knocked her over pulling out when she was crossing the road, and the bus insurance company didn't want to pay for her injuries. And they got a hold of the fact that she was an incest survivor, and that this had resulted in a lot of psychological damage. And so the idea in an abuse cult is that if you're hit or abused, you are tarnished and somehow a lower class citizen, which is why in a shame-based cult, you hide your wounds. In an empathic cult, you share your wounds and people join you in loving and healing them. In a sociopathic and abuse cult, the more you show your wounds, the more the hounds gather to pounce. And in a cult that says that capital is more valuable than the human beings that create it, it makes perfect sense to pounce on the people who are weakest. It's the crocodile brain. The reptilian sociopathic brain sees weakness as an opportunity to exploit, to take more. The wounded animal is attacked by the crocodile, not helped. And so the reptilian brainstem organizes around this. So the insurance company successfully convinced the jury that because this woman was an incest survivor and had to see a psychiatrist to repair the abuse foisted upon her by a cult that allows any parent to have a child and takes little interest in the abuse history in that family, which can, to a large extent, accurately produce the statistical probability of a child being severely abused in that system. We do not care about our children enough to actually ask and gather data because while the government, like many organizations, was formed by the people, for the people, and of the people, it's not really run that way, whether it's President Trump's efforts to hold taxpayer events at his hotels so he can make more money as president or sell favor to this or that. It's not really run that way, is it? Where you can raise your hand and say, oh, my government, you'll be delighted to know that this law and this practice and this failure and this corrupt practice and this politician has fucked up my life. And if you would just do this, this, and this, you can serve me and help me get back on my feet again. And here's all the details, and I'm sure you'd be delighted to respond in a timely, courteous manner. Go fuck yourself if you expect your government to actually respond, particularly when the press isn't around to look at things. So it's a lot of the deterioration and destruction we have is that all concentrated power is formed on the promise that once concentrated, once this law is passed, once police can carry guns, once this is done, once power is concentrated, it will always be used for your benefit. So please give us your vote, please give us your money, please give us your time. We will use this power to help you. Of course, once the power is granted, the leverage has shifted. Now I'm the one with the gun. Maybe I don't feel like a public defender today. Maybe I feel pissed off that my wages are low. And want to take it out on a few members of the public who probably didn't vote for my pay raise. And now it becomes, I've got power. Let's see how passively aggressively I can knock this out. And who's the scapegoats in this cult? No one's going to mind if I shoot a few black people or this and that. It's a completely different system, right, than a rich white person. So let's use this system for my needs to feel important and all of this. So smearing, hiding, and burying the data is another important strategy. And over time, this untrustworthy behavior deteriorates the value of the mission because the mission has been corrupted and turned on its head. The organization was formed, the company was founded, the contract was signed in order for this benefit to happen to this individual or group of people. And instead, the situation and the power dynamic is being used to cover up the inadequacies of the professional, to mask the truth, to make sure that the income of the organization continues by not, hiring a really cheap insurance company so that the public isn't really protected there and doing this and doing this. But of course, that's not what we can talk about in public because then our funds would drive up. So the survival and security of the organization as an effort trumps that of the original mission. And now you have an inverted power structure that is corrupt and destructive. And this is the cycle of all unmonitored, all unchallenged and unmonitored power structures. Gather power initially, for the most part, with actual good intentions. And they accumulate more power under the auspices of we're going to use this for your benefit. They encounter turbulence and volatility at some stage in the organization's life. They switch loyalty from the mission to the survival of their identity by protecting the organization they identify with, and then they proceed to unravel and destroy the very mission that they pledged to in order to protect the reputation, the funds, the short-term, whatever the roles, the job description of the organization, at the very expense of the public in which they were formed. And when this goes on chronically, revolution and violence is always the result. Because particularly when an excess of power, when a strong imbalance of power creates between a corrupt government, between a corrupt dictator, between a behemoth of a bullying and dominating company, people invariably give more and more support to the other side, to create more of a balance of power and restore the integrity of the original mission. Because all growth, all evolution occurs when power is concentrated to serve the intelligent needs, not the addictions, the intelligent needs of human beings. And all evil and devolution and destruction occurs when power is concentrated under false pretenses or under force and used to harm the well-being as leverage. You've got a large mass now against a small, and used to harm intentionally or as a byproduct of protecting the organization's identity.